Hopefully everybody can hear me. My name is Stephanie, and today we're going to be talking about creating and maintaining boundaries for adult entertainers. And really, it's for anybody, but we'll just say for adult entertainers because that's what many of you are. So, who am I? I am a licensed professional counselor. I'm a sex therapist. I'm in the doctoral program for clinical sexology. I have just a few more months for that. And I am a skydiver. I love skydiving. I'm in an open relationship and I'm kinky. I'm a mom. I have 2 children. I am a sexual assault survivor and a domestic violence survivor. So that's me. That's my husband in a very broad nutshell. And so I'm really excited to get to talk to you guys today because this is a very important topic that I feel like we just completely overlook. So I'm going to read some things to you, and I want you to see if these sound anything like you. You disregard your own feelings, values, needs, and limits. You're not honest with those who are close to you, and you don't feel that you're being treated right. You allow others to define you or give your life meaning. Saying no makes you feel guilty. I am so guilty of that one. I'm working on it. I'm in therapy too. It's what we do. Try to please everyone around you so you feel needed. Falling quickly for a partner that you don't really know that well. And having sex with someone even when you don't want to. Healthy boundaries are components of self-care. That's because in work or in our personal relationships, poor boundaries lead to resentment, anger, burnout. So if any of this sounds like you, you're in the right place today. So we are going to talk about 6 types of boundaries. And first, I want to just kind of go over what stops us from setting boundaries. It's the fear of rejection, ultimately abandonment, fear of confrontation, oh my God, the guilt monster, and safety concerns, right? So we have a lot of different things, but let's talk about the 6 boundaries that we're going to set today. We're going to set physical boundaries, intellectual boundaries, emotional boundaries, sexual boundaries, material boundaries, and time boundaries. I'm not sure, I can't see you guys, but I know that some of these I have never really thought about boundaries for until I became a therapist and started teaching this. It's not something that we're taught in school, right? It's not something that we grew up knowing. So it's a good time to learn them. So I would like for everybody to get out a piece of paper if you have notes or whatnot. And on your piece of paper, I want you to write at the top, one person or one entity, it could be a boss, a company, that you want to establish firmer boundaries with. We're going to use this person throughout the whole presentation, so you're going to write their name at the top. Got it? Okay, let's start. Physical boundaries. Physical boundaries are the need for personal space. Rest, healthy food, drinking plenty of water, your comfort, right? Physical boundaries refer to your body and your personal space. You might enjoy public displays of affection or be uncomfortable with it. It's whatever you need. Your partner, if he kisses you in public and you're uncomfortable with it, that means you need to set a boundary. Okay? Sharing your preferences and expectations can feel super difficult, especially if you're just starting out. But sharing them can make you feel respected and appreciated, right? So did you know that it is perfectly acceptable for you to tell someone that you don't know, that you don't want, or that you don't want to be touched, or that you need personal space? We are taught from young children, oh, go hug Uncle Earl. He just loves you. And you've never even met Uncle Earl. Or now give grandpa kisses. And you didn't want to give grandpa a kiss, but here we are. And so we grow up not really having a voice for our personal boundaries and our personal space. But that is, our parents raised us wrong, just plain and simple. So I want you guys to really think about that and think about what kind of physical boundaries can you set with the person or entity that you have on there. So some violations include inappropriate or unwanted touch, being denied your basic physical needs, having someone come into your space uninvited. So I want you to, on your piece of paper, write one physical boundary that you would like to implement with your specific person or entity. For me, I don't want to hug my or kiss my aunts and uncles that I don't know, and I don't want to be forced into that. I don't want to be forced into immediate touch. I want to be able to control my surroundings and my autonomy in my body. So that's a boundary for me. Okay, let's move on to the next. If you guys have any questions, I can see the chat. So it'll pop up for me and I can answer your questions as we go. Please feel free to chime in and pipe in. I'm super flexible like that. And in other ways. All right. So your intellectual boundaries, your thoughts, ideas, and curiosity. So when I say intellectual boundaries, what's the first thing that kind of pops in your head? Does anybody want to share in the chat? Thank you. Gaslighting. Yes. That's huge. And we're going to talk a lot about setting those boundaries. So intellectual boundaries, your thoughts, your ideas begin and another's leaves off, right? Knowing what you feel right now and for you and what you're thinking in various situations and in all types of relationships. So let's say you have an idea for a new show or a song or a dance or something that has anything to do with your intellectual property, and someone else takes that from you. They steal it from you. That is a violation of your intellectual boundaries. Understanding what feels right for you to share about your personal thoughts during various situations, especially during mixed company, is you get to choose that. I know that, I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm from Texas and down here in the South. For a long time, I was taught growing up, and this is just what I was taught. So I'm generalizing my experience, not as a whole, but I was taught that women should be seen and not heard, and we weren't allowed to think for ourselves. Yeah. Pretty bad. So being told that I have the freedom to have intellectual boundaries and own my own thoughts and own my own ideas and not have them planted in there by somebody else was huge for me. These violations include dismissing your ideas and thoughts. Okay, so oversharing with those who haven't earned it. I'm a counselor. I tend to pull that out of people, right? So, but I get it. Allowing others to use your ideas and thoughts as your own. Have you ever had a boss that you were like, you went to them and told them you had this great idea, and then all of a sudden they take it to their boss and it's their idea now? That crossed an intellectual boundary. So that's when you have the right to claim and to set that boundary moving forward, to claim your intellectual property. Okay. So when we're talking about intellectual boundaries, you can say things like, I will remind you to not end. Oh, wait, sorry, read the wrong thing. It hurts when we disagree politically and you tell me my opinion is wrong. It makes me feel like you don't respect my views. If you say that my opinion is wrong, I will remind you not to, and end the discussion if we continue this discussion. That is a firm boundary. I will not talk about this with you. If you continue to talk about it, I will end the conversation. That's an intellectual boundary. So I want you to write one intellectual boundary for your person or entity that you're thinking of. Gaslighting is a huge violation of your intellectual boundaries. That's implanting thoughts that weren't there and making you think that you're going crazy, pretty much. So something happens, you saw it that way, you know you saw it that way, but then somebody tells you you didn't see it that way and you're wrong. And then they start making you believe that you were wrong and questioning yourself. So that's what gaslighting is. So that is a huge violation of your intellectual boundaries. Let's talk about emotional boundaries. These are your thoughts and ideas. Oh, I just lied. These are your feelings. That's a mess up in the slide. Wow, I should have, sorry about that. These, you need to honor your feelings and your energy. Okay. Emotional boundaries are huge. Thank you for saying that. Emotional boundaries are very huge. It's recognizing your feelings as your feelings and not allowing anybody else to influence them and knowing when it's right to share them. So for example, when you speak of an emotional trauma or your feelings during like the first development of a relationship, when do you do that? When do you decide to share that? That's your emotional boundary. That's you get to decide. You need to be in touch with your feelings. Healthy emotional boundaries require you to know where you end and your partner begins. If we're in a relationship or if we are working, where do you end and your partner begins? When you feel guilty, ashamed, or upset or undervalued, the boundaries come into place to help take care of that. So if you're upset and your partner tries to fix it and you just feel like your partner isn't hearing you and he's just not paying attention to your emotions, this is where you might need to set a boundary. So one of the things that I set into with my partner is when I go to him and I'm asking him about, I just need to word vomit, right? He now tells me, stop. Do you need me to listen or do you need me to fix? And I'll tell him what I need. That has cut down on so many arguments between us. So knowing what you need emotionally and what your feelings are, if someone's mocking your feelings, this is unhealthy. This is a violation. Leaving yourself feeling exposed. Know when to stop talking. How many of you have trouble with that? Right? So also these boundaries are really important for adult entertainers and sex workers because you're opening yourself up in a way that most people don't. And I don't want you to open yourself up too soon to somebody and then get criticized because that's hard. That's very hard. You get to have your own feelings, your energies, and your ideas. They don't get to dictate them. So we're at one emotional boundary that you want to implement. And an emotional boundary is the feelings. This next one is a tough one. Sexual boundaries. This is where consent, agreement, respect, and a clear understanding of preferences and desires come into effect, and your privacy. Sexual boundaries refer to your expectations around physical intimacy, what is, or what you're not okay with when you're being sexual. So boundaries around frequency, sexual comments, unwanted sexual touch, expectations around others, others involved in your sex life, what sex acts you prefer and what's off limits to not be even discussed. Healthy boundaries include this mutual agreement of consent and an understanding of each other's sexual limits and desires. recognizing and respecting your personal limitations, knowing your desires, and having the ability to give consent and providing that same respect to others is setting strong sexual boundaries. If you were sexually abused, like when you were younger, or anytime actually, if you were sexually abused, and you're triggered by certain positions, maybe that's a sexual boundary that's needed. You might want to avoid sexual contact with your partner if you are reminded of the trauma from that experience. So this boundary of not doing this position, if that's a trigger, will help you avoid sexual confrontation with your partner, and it will really help you have a really healthy sex life and happy. So one example of how you can say this is, okay, I have a hard time enjoying a certain sexual position because it reminds me of a really difficult time in my life. So in order for me to enjoy sex fully, I need to avoid that position. And also, I'm going to let you know if I become bothered by another position. That's a sexual boundary. I want you guys, somebody to type in the comments one example of a good sexual boundary. While we're waiting for that, some violations to this really include just, if you don't want to have sex, you getting punished. You being pressured to be in unwanted sex acts that you said no, but you felt pressured into it, and here we are. Unwanted touch, sexual assault. So some healthy sexual boundaries, safe sex. You may have everybody must wear a condom rule if you're doing group sex or having an orgy. We can change the position can we change the position because this hurts me? Being able to use your voice and ask for what you need during sex. You guys have a very unique position in the world because people expect things from you because you're adult entertainers or sex workers. And so you're just societally expected to do this, whatever they want, right? You are allowed to set these boundaries. You are allowed to say no. I don't care what you do for a living. If it's a boundary that needs to be set, it makes you uncomfortable, you set that boundary and you hold firm to it if you need to. Sometimes boundaries are flexible, but sexual boundaries are vital to really making sure that you are healthy, safe, and happy in the future. All sex is pleasurable sex if they have consent, right? So if you are consenting to whatever, then we do it. But I just really, being a sexual assault survivor, it's really hard because I didn't think that I had boundaries. I was assaulted very young as a child, and then again as I got older. But I thought that my boundaries, I didn't have any because I wasn't allowed to have them growing up. I was supposed to give my body to people. If I wanted a guy to like me, well, then I had to have sex with him because that's what was expected. I was pressured into growing up a whole lot of stuff that I didn't really want to do, but I did anyway because I thought I was supposed to. I am 40 years old and I am still learning my sexual boundaries. True story. This couple weekends ago, I finally used my voice and set a sexual boundary during a play situation. Everybody was shocked. Like, play stopped and they looked at me and I was like, no, keep playing, keep playing. I just need this. And I never ever ask for what I need, but we have to, we have that right. So make sure that you are who you are. Oh, I'm gonna learn how to work this PowerPoint. So I want you to write one sexual boundary that you want to implement with a specific person or the entity that you wrote on your paper. What is one thing that you can do to ensure that you are setting a sexual boundary with them? Yes. Cohen, thank you. A safe word can help because boundaries and consent can change. And I love that. You can stop at any time. Your consent can change at any time. And what's okay 1 minute, like you said, is not okay the next. And so that safe word, wonderful idea. Also, I mean, that's a sexual boundary that you have to have a safe word. Material boundaries. Who do you loan your stuff to? Who do you allow use your things? Who are you willing to share it with? Material boundaries is where you're choosing your limits on what you want to share to whom and with, or to what you want to share and to whom. For example, you may lend money to a family member or a friend, but would you loan money to a stranger that you met that night? That might be a material boundary. It is healthy for you to know what you can and want to share with others. This could be clothes, shoes, your house, anything, loaning money, giving money, whatever that you feel. Financial boundaries are all about money, but boundaries, it can be, the material boundaries can be about both. So you really have to kind of hone in there. Let's talk about some violations: stealing, damaging, pressuring to give them money or to share things with them, right? That's violating your boundary. Absolutely. Money is a huge one. Okay. So I want you to think about a time when your material boundaries were crossed. And if you don't mind, I would like someone to share, if you want to, in the chat, just one time when they were crossed, and maybe that's a boundary you need to set now. I personally would give the shirt off my back to anybody but my brothers, because I know that they're not going to give anything back to me. And I know that's terrible, but yeah, I don't want to, because I know that they're not going to use it effectively. They're not going to use my shirt productively, whatever I'm giving them sometimes. So I tend to not. Yeah, money is what people, that's pretty much what all people seem to care about, is money. So think about that person, that entity, and write down a material boundary. Yes, siblings are a common case of overstepping material boundaries, because they automatically assume, well, you're my sister, so, or you're my brother, so I can have it. You know, you're going to give it to me. It doesn't matter. And so they never ask. They just take or do. And so it results in stealing. And then they're like, oh, but you're my brother, you're my sister. You're not going to turn me in. You have to uphold your material boundaries. The last boundary that we are going to talk about is time boundaries. How do you effectively use your time? We live in a world, ladies and gentlemen, where we don't know what's going on 1 second to the next. We live in a world where our time is valuable, but it's valuable for you, and you get to decide what you want to do with it. Granted, you know, if you work, I get that. You have a call schedule, I get that. But outside of that, outside of the norm, you get to decide. So time boundaries allow you to plan your time, yours, without overcommitting. And I hit yours because sometimes we just try to pile it all in there and overcommit, and that's not going to help us. Setting time boundaries is incredibly important for work, for home, and socially. So, you know, if you go home and you're home, maybe you're not allowing your boss to pile on extra work. Or if you are a cam girl and you say you're going to be on between these hours, you're not being kind of bullied into spending more time, unless you're making a hell of a lot of money, but you're not feeling pressured to spend more time than what you're willing to give. Cam girl or guy, I didn't mean to just say cam girl, but a cam individual. So make sure that you are effectively using your time. Family, setting time boundaries with those people that came out wrong, with your family. Family will violate, best friends will violate. Well, we all know work will, but people try to get in there and just steal all of the time. Healthy boundaries for you guys might sound something like, I can't come over this weekend, or I can't come to the event this weekend, or going into something and saying, I can only stay for an hour. I would love to, but I feel like I'd be overcommitting. Is there another time? All of these are great things to say. Violations also include asking professionals for time without paying them. How many of you have been used for your time without payment? I know I have. When people find out I'm a sex therapist, it's like, oh, let me talk to you. And they know you're not paying me. And I know that sometimes that sounds terrible, but I worked hard for this degree, and I feel like my time and effort are valuable. So I need to be paid for my stuff, just like you. You need to be paid. We don't give stuff away for free. So if someone's demanding time from you, maybe you told somebody that you're not going to be available and they keep calling you, canceling last minute because you overcommitted. All of these are violations of time boundaries. So I want to make sure that you guys are really trying to commit to those boundaries. So on your paper, go ahead and write one time boundary. This is really awkward that I can't see you guys. I'm used to being on the other side. So we've talked about what the boundaries are. Let's talk about how we can apply them. I was just reading this quick comment. My ex and I were online performers together on live sites and content platforms. When she wanted a divorce, she changed all the accounts overnight and stole the entire business we built. Oh my goodness. That was crossing a huge material boundary. Yes, it was. Yep. I'm sure that you guys are, very aware of contracts and probably speak contract more fluently than anybody. But those contracts, even with girlfriends, boyfriends, my husband and I own a business together, and we have a contract because if anything goes south, we are protecting our material boundaries. Absolutely. So does your boundary fit the situation? So you guys now have a list of boundaries on there. So we're going to ask ourselves the following questions, and then we're going to do some practicing with it. All right. Does this boundary apply to this specific situation? What are the ramifications, or what are the risks for removing my boundary? So if my boundary is I'm not going to overcommit and say that I'm going to go out with my girlfriends on Saturday night, I'm going to tell them that I'm going to stay home and not do anything. Well, what's the risk for that? Are they going to be mad at me? Are they going to not like me anymore? So just kind of weigh that. What will I gain by removing my boundary? If I do go out, what am I going to gain? Probably a lot of fun, probably a lot of drinks, maybe some little more fun. We don't know. Are there any potential benefits for removing my boundary for this specific situation? And if I remove this boundary, will I regret it? Will I regret it if I don't? Will I regret, what will I regret it if I don't get what I want from the boundary? So if I remove this boundary and I don't get what I want from it, am I going to regret removing it? So these are all questions that you have to ask yourself. So these are the questions that I want you to kind of list, I guess, below your boundaries, and let's apply this. So real world application, lending or giving money. Okay, this applies to lending or giving money, as well as buying toys and equipment for someone else's enjoyment. Pricey lingerie, new shoes, dildos, floggers, all of this stuff is very expensive if you're going to get the well-made stuff that's going to hold up, and you guys all know that. So if you're buying something for someone else's enjoyment, this is what we're going to go with. We're going to kind of test our boundaries. Does my boundary apply to this situation? So let's say I had a friend ask me to borrow $200 for rent. Okay. And I have a very strict rule that I only allow people to borrow up to $100 at a time, and they don't get to borrow any more money until they pay me back that $100. But now she's coming and asking for $200. And so I have a boundary. So am I going to, so my boundary applies to this situation. Am I going to keep the money, lend the money? What am I going to do with that money? Okay. What are the risks for removing my boundary? Well, the risks for me would be losing that money, because what if they don't pay me back? What if I'm short on money throughout the month? What if we lose our friendship? So all of these things that's some risks of removing my boundary of loaning people more than $100. What will I gain? I'll feel good about myself, feel good about helping others. You know, if I'm buying pricey lingerie or new shoes, you know, I would get sexy attention from somebody else. It's all part of, you know, our gains, but is the gains worth the risk? Will I feel regret by removing this boundary? Okay. If the answer is no, then you're done. Loan them the money, right? But if it's yes, then we have a few more questions we need to look at. What happens if they don't pay me back? Can you gift this money to them? And then if they return it, it's a bonus? Changing our mindset just a little might help too. So my friend who comes to me and often asks, you know, hey, can I borrow that $200? You know what, I'm gonna gift you this. If you can return it, you can return it. If not, I get it. But that's a mindset that I'm choosing. Okay, another one, performing an awkward service for a client, director, or partner. This can be something that you have to go out of your way to do, a request that causes you like, ooh, maybe to test your morals, causes you to kind of say, I don't know. Something that might cost you money to learn. All of this stuff. So let's kind of come up with a situation. Let's say that someone have a situation for me. So let's say that I was asked to do a sex act that I've never done before. And quite frankly, I don't even know how to do it. So it causes me pause, right? Okay. So does my boundary apply to the situation? Yes, because it's a desire. This person asked me for something and it's a desire, right? I might not have a boundary around it yet, and that's very valid. But when they asked me, I was like, ooh, I don't know. So when I did that, ooh, I don't know, that was telling me that maybe a boundary needed to be set. Maybe I needed to evaluate what I'm willing to do. So if you're asked to do things and you get that, will I do that? Maybe you need to sit down and set a boundary with that. So what's the risks for removing this boundary? Resentment, being put in a very uncomfortable situation. If they're asking me to go and learn something or go somewhere, am I going to have time to recharge? Am I going to practice self-care before my next job or my next gig? Am I sacrificing my morals? So these are all things you need to ask yourself. What will you gain? You'll be making someone happy, and absolutely you could be increasing your revenue. It could be a skill that you originally was like, ooh, I don't know. But then you tried it, learned some more about it, loved it, and you charge more for it. Could you possibly feeling regret after removing this boundary? Like I said earlier, if it's no, we're done. If it's yes, then can you shift this request into something that will be valuable to you, like learning the new skill, increasing your rate for the service, or even negotiating the request? If it negotiating boundaries. That's what we're going to talk about next. But negotiating is very, very, very vital. Okay. Let's talk about negotiating boundaries really quickly. Someone comes to you and they have a request, and maybe it's crossing or pushing up against that boundary. And, you're like, okay, I hear that you want this. I'm not willing to do that, but I am willing to do a variation of it. Can we negotiate what is healthy? Okay. The friend who wanted for me to borrow money, or to borrow money from me for $200, right? Me saying, okay, I have a boundary where I don't loan more than $100 at a time. I mean, would $100 help? Negotiate those boundaries. You have the power. Your personal boundaries protect the inner core of your identity and your right to choices. You get to choose. Only you can decide what your personal boundaries are in situations. And they can probably, they will and probably will look different for everybody in your life. Quite frankly, my mom, I'm going to have way different boundaries with her than I'm going to have with my partner, because my mom is crazy, but still, we have different roles, different boundaries, and that's okay. Boundaries are constantly changing. This is very healthy. I suggest that you take, after you write down these boundaries and you start taking stock of your boundaries, identify what you're willing to change, what you're willing to modify, how is it going to evolve, and kind of track how you change over the years. So me and my husband are in an open relationship, and I'm just going to use same room play. Forever, I was like, I don't want you to leave the room. I want you in the room. I feel comfortable with you in the room. So that was a boundary for me. Now I'm like, go play, go do what you do, go have fun. I'm busy. So I negotiated, and that boundary changed because I became more comfortable with the act. Also, you have to communicate your boundaries. Communicating your boundaries is vital. Now, some of us don't communicate our boundaries well. So I'm going to teach you guys one thing that I love, and I teach all of my clients this. These are called I messages. And so let's say that your boundary was crossed. So I'm just going to do a generic. When you crossed my boundaries during our sexual encounter, it made me feel like I was any kind of word. I was any negative word. Abandoned keeps coming to my mind, and I don't know why that's abandoned, because now I need to say some of these words and they're blank. So when you violated my boundaries during that sexual act, I felt unappreciated, unheard, unimportant, because I asked you, and we talked about this boundary before. Moving forward, I would prefer that you listen and talk to me before we change boundaries. Before you change something or before you cross my boundary, I want you to talk about it with me first, and we can negotiate. So that is communication. That's when you insert whatever they did. I feel, insert how you feel, because why do you feel that way? And I would prefer. What do you prefer? No is a full sentence. You can say no, and you don't have to explain yourself. This was a very hard concept for me personally to understand growing up, because I was never allowed to be told to tell anybody no. I always had to do what they wanted me to do. So allowing yourself to say no and not feeling any regret is perfectly okay. Absolutely okay. Okay, I'm gonna just put this up here real quick, and then I'm gonna come on and I'm gonna answer any questions that you guys have. So you can find me at stephanieandfox.com. Our podcast is called Evolve Your Intimacy with Stephanie and Fox. And if you are an Audible book listener, that makes sense. Unfuck Your Boundaries, Build Better Relationships Through Consent, Communication, and Expressing Your Needs by Faith Harper is amazing. So it's available through Audible. Not being paid for this endorsement or anything like that. That book is just amazing. So definitely check that out. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and come back on here. And let's talk about some of these questions that we have. So one of the questions was, I know how to work chat, kind of. Also, I don't know if you're able to, but you might want to. You are definitely encouraged, and please unmute your screen or unmute your audio, and definitely we can have a conversation too. So how do you deal? Oh, wait, Lord, I'm having issues with this. As also a writer, sometimes like now, there are times where I have to be away from people and have a boundary so I can write. Some people don't like that. Yep. Some people are going to pressure you to get, to be with them, and they don't understand. They don't understand that you need your space. You need your calm boundary, that boundary. They're not going to like boundaries. If you've never set a boundary before, whoever you set this boundary with, they're going to hate it. That's why it's when you start a new relationship or right off the bat, you start those boundaries immediately. Don't hold back. Don't try to see if they're the one or, whatever we're trying to do. Set those boundaries that make you feel comfortable immediately. So we have another question. How do you deal with a wealthy client that becomes obsessed with the online persona and keeps sending huge tips for constant attention? And little by little, you're trying to shift your boundaries. That's where we have to go back and ask ourselves, is this boundary, is removing this boundary, what are the risks? What are the benefits? If you don't have any benefits and this is a firm boundary, you need to tell them, I appreciate that you are a fan. I appreciate that you like what I do. However, these are my boundaries. And I know that obsessed fans will keep going and keep going and keep going. And so, if it's a strong boundary, you might have to block them. You might have to remove them from your site. This is up to you. And I know it's a wealthy client. I get it. And they think sometimes that the boundaries don't apply to them. And that is terrible, but that's what they do. Some of them, not all. I'm just very brief generalizing here. And so, do you need that money? That's such a hard one. So, oh, okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. Are there any techniques you can recommend to help be more affirmative in setting and enforcing boundaries, specifically sexual boundaries? Yes, absolutely. You have to have a conversation before, and you sit down and you say, well, first off, you have to know what your boundaries are. Maybe you list them out, maybe you think about them, you know what your sexual boundaries are, and these are things that are non-negotiable, not doing, right? Everybody involved in that play session or in that activity or that experience needs to know that these are boundaries that I will not bend on. So having that conversation beforehand and really learning what their boundaries are and building that rapport will help. If you don't have that opportunity, if a boundary's crossed during play or during an experience, what I'm gonna call them experiences, during a job, you can stop. You can stop anytime you want and say, no, I don't appreciate this, or I don't need this. Were there any boundaries that you feel like you're going to have a hard time setting? Like maybe out of the 6 boundaries, do you feel like you're going to have a harder time setting material boundaries, time boundaries, sexual boundaries? Like what are you feeling is going to be the hardest for you to set moving forward? Emotional boundaries, 100%. So emotional boundaries are, it's difficult. And I know I've said that several times, but they're so fluid. Somebody might hurt your feelings, and you don't even realize that you needed that boundary until later. That's another thing. If you are in a situation and you feel and you realize that you've been hurt by something, you can go back and say, when you did this, it made me feel this way because whatever. I need this moving forward. I prefer this moving forward. You can always go back and say, I didn't like that. That was an emotional boundary I didn't know that I need to set, but I set it and we're not crossing it anymore. At the end of the day, we always have to ask ourselves, at the end of the day, we always have to ask ourselves, is money worth destroying who we are as a person? As a fan and creator, we must always question and know who we are. And it's always hard when we're trying to please others. Absolutely. And especially when there's large amounts of money involved. Money tends to sway morals, tends to kind of, when we go, relax us a little bit. Oh, well, they're paying me well, but is that worth it? Is receiving that money worth you feeling the way you're feeling? Separating my feelings from those I deeply care about is hard. I take ownership of others' feelings almost unknowingly. That is a very common characteristic, especially for empaths, especially for counselors. And actually, you guys are sort of like counselors. If you're sex workers and you're working with clients one-on-one individually, adult entertainers, you guys are hearing the good, the bad, the ugly. And so how do you take care of yourself? How do you separate that? How do you protect yourself from going into that world with them? And you do that by saying, that's a topic I'm not comfortable about talking to you about. Or, you know what, I appreciate you wanting to tell me all of this fun stuff, but I just feel like I'm not in the right headspace to really hear it or understand it. You get to choose. Being able to say no. You can just simply say no. No, I'm good. I don't need to hear you. I need to feel. You need to feel you, not everybody else. Does anybody else have any questions for me? That's great. Todd said that with a lot of people that they disagree, he always tries to say, I love you, but I don't like what you did. That's a good one too, for close friends and family. You're reaffirming that you still care about them, that their feelings matter, that you didn't like their actions, but that doesn't mean that you don't like them and you didn't love them. It was their actions that are causing you a little bit of pause. Well, guys, any last minute questions or any last how do you implement your own boundaries when someone corners you at a party and wants to offload? Oh, I love this one. So when I'm at a party and people know that I'm a sex therapist, I'm just using myself for this example, Dickinson. So when I'm at a party and people are wanting me just to unload, or they catch me in a corner, or they catch me in the bathroom, they always get me in the damn bathroom, never fails. And they just want to word vomit all over me. I politely tell them, listen, in my sweetest Southern accent, listen, your feelings and your emotions and what you're feeling right now is very valid. I don't have the bandwidth or the emotional space to be able to process this with you effectively, and it's not the right place. So maybe you should reach out to your counselor. Maybe you should reach out to somebody, a professional, a mental health professional is what I usually say, because if they're friends with me and they're cornering me, then obviously I can't take them as a client, but I do suggest others and I do refer out. But I will say in a heartbeat, I don't have the emotional bandwidth for this. This is not the right place. Oh, thank you, Natalie. I honestly don't think I have an accent, but everybody tells me I do. But usually it's my bless your heart. Oh, I've had people talk to me for hours. If you yes, you feel like you're a punching bag. I can't tell you how many times when I first started out in my counseling career that people would corner me and want to talk and want to just me to fix everything in the bathroom. I don't get it. You do get beat up unless you hold those boundaries firm. Boundaries are in place to keep you healthy, sane, and emotionally safe and physically safe as well. Natalie says that's why you always give out your business card. Absolutely. I have a stack with me at all times, and I hand it to them and say, you know what, reach out to me on the website. We can talk all about this. Call my office. We can get you set if they're not already like a friend or a client. But yeah, definitely have your resources with you to be able to hand out. And that's another great way to walk away. Guys, thank you. This was so much fun. I really appreciate you all.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I enjoyed this so much. It felt empowering.
Thank you.
Listening to you speaking felt empowering, and the advice you were giving was just, I think it's beneficial for everyone, even folks who do have boundaries in place. There were certain points that you brought up that I hadn't even considered, like buying gifts. When you spend that money on that lingerie for that person, you're giving them time and money and thought, and that, yeah, it was very thought-provoking. Thank you so much. So again, I'd just like to thank all of our sponsors. Without them, this mental health summit would not be possible. So that is Flirt for Free, Pornhub, Chatterbait, Loyal Fans, XLoveCam, myonly.chat, and Babe Station. And I hope you will all hang around and join us in a few minutes to speak with Rachel Wells on It's Really Okay Not to Be Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, guys.